And today is a special day because not only is it St. Patrick's Day, it is National Quilting Month, and Saturday is Worldwide Quilting Day. So it's great that we're all going to gather together today and talk about quilting, and I want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. So I want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. I'm assuming that my sound is good. If it's not, please put something in the chat. And if you see anything in the chat that is asking you for money, don't do it. Don't do it. This is an absolutely free class, and we have had some people sneaking in and posting links that shouldn't be there. So don't post it or don't click on anything where anybody's asking you to join for any money. It's not us, it's somebody else. So today what we're going to talk about is long arm quilting. And I'm going to start with a little bit of a presentation, but before I do that, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I am a Viking educator. I live in Massachusetts. I am a long armer, and I, before COVID, would go around and teach classes in stores, perhaps local to you, and hope to do that again someday soon. I miss being with my students in person. The virtual classes are nice, but they're not the same as being right there with you and helping you learn how to use the top of the line machines and do different techniques. But we are filling the gap by doing a lot of different classes for dealers virtually. So if you're hungry for material, go to your local dealer and ask them what classes they're going to sponsor with the Viking educators. So I'm going to switch to my presentation. Let's see here. Go here and here. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the Viking long arms that we currently have, our new long arm, which there's two versions. There is the Platinum Q160, which is a sit-down quilter. And then we have the Platinum Q165, which is a stand-up quilter, which would go in a frame. So you have these two models. They're very, very similar. Basically, the difference is how they attach to the table. The Q160 comes with a table, and they are both the same size, and it just depends on your preference. There are advantages to each of them, and it's kind of like cars. I like to have a big car that I can haul stuff in, like a pickup truck or something like that, and another person might want a very small car. So it's just personal preference, but I'm going to go over what I see as the advantages of each, and to help you make a decision if perhaps you don't have a long arm yet. So the sit-down quilter is nice for people that maybe have back problems or can't stand, or they like to move the fabric under the needle rather than the needle over the fabric. Now, I prefer to have a stand-up quilter, the Q165, and for a variety of reasons. And I'm going to show you some of the frames that we have. We have this fabric frame, which is a 5-foot frame, and this frame is good for people that don't have the space for a big 10 or 12-foot quilting frame. And I started out with this frame and used it for quite some time. In fact, I quilted recently, or not too long ago, not recently, a king-size quilt on that. The way that you do it, when you're going to quilt in the fabric frame, you quilt all down one side, move it over, and quilt all down the other side. Because you can't, it's only 5 feet, king-size quilt's much bigger. So that's how you use the fabric frame to quilt something big. So you're not limited to that 5-foot width. You can quilt something big. However, to me, the disadvantage is that because your quilt clamps on, you still have to baste your quilt before you start quilting it. Same thing with the Q160. You have to baste it in some manner before you start working on it, whether that's pin basting or spray basting, but stitching by hand, it does need to be basted. As opposed to if you have the frame, when you load it on your frame, you don't have to baste it. You basically load it up on those bars, and you are going to baste it in the beginning using your long arm. So to me, that's a huge advantage. I'm over basting. I don't want to baste anymore, getting down on the floor and smoothing out quilt tops and quilt backs. That's something I don't want to do anymore. The other advantage is you can do this standing. To me, I sit and sew so many hours. It's nice to have another activity where I'm standing instead of sitting. However, some people do use a stool. They will buy these very high stools on wheels, and they'll use that with their long arm so they can stand sometimes, and they can sit when their back starts to bother them, or their knees or their legs. So either way, I have underneath my long arm, I have a material that I purchased specifically for my sewing room that is kind of like the blocks that you put together in gyms it's this foam pad. So I have a foam pad across my whole floor on my underneath my long arm. So when I'm standing, I don't have any issues with standing for long periods of time. Now, when you first get the long arm, you have a lot of questions about basic setup, how to thread it, about tension, about any number of things. Well, we have 17 short videos on the Platinum long arm on YouTube. So if you search on Husqvarna Viking Platinum Q160 or Q165, you will pull up a whole bunch of very informative videos. I'm going to give you a quick overview today, and I'm going to go into some things that there aren't videos for on the YouTube channel. But this is a great resource to go back to and whenever you wonder about something, if you're doing it right or not. Now, of course, when you first get your long arm, you have to practice, because particularly if you're going from doing free motion on your domestic machine where you're moving the fabric, not the needle, then it's different fine motor control muscles than when you're moving your fabric. And a lot of people said to me, well, you should take a piece of paper and a pen and you should start doodling all the time. Doodle all your free motion designs that you want to do. It helped a bit, but what really helped me was to take a pen and to actually doodle holding it like this, because this is how you hold your long arm, the handles, and you move like this. If you practice your doodling like you write, you don't realize you're using muscles to kind of turn your pen in different ways. And that doesn't translate as well in practicing for free motion quilting as doing it like this. And that really, working on practicing holding the pen like this, really kind of solidified the motions necessary for me to translate my free motion skills from my domestic machine over to the long arm, because I'm using the stand-up one where the needle is kind of like my pen, and I'm moving my pen over my fabric rather than moving my fabric under my needle. Now, what you're looking at here is when I first got the long arm, I took 2 old sheets and I took a flannel blanket and I made a quilt sandwich, and I practiced different stitches. I practiced different rulers. I played around with different threads to find what I wanted to use. And I know a lot of people want to know, well, what thread do you recommend? I started out using a cotton thread, a very good cotton thread that everybody was recommending, a lot of quilting teachers recommend. I found that it generated a lot of lint. And when you get a lot of lint underneath your long arm, if you have it on a trolley, that lint can get trapped underneath the rollers, and then you get like kind of a skippy movement. If you keep the rollers clean, then the movement is very, very smooth, kind of like skating over glass. But if you get a lot of lint under there, then it's not going to be pretty. So I switched to a polyester thread. What I generally use is Glide on the top, which is made by Quilting, and So Fine in the bobbin. Those are my two go-to threads, but everybody's different. It just depends on your personal preference. But those two, once I switched to those threads, I said, this is it. This is what I'm going to use from now on, unless I'm using a specialty thread. Like if I want to use a 100-weight thread for some reason, or I want to use a metallic thread, then that, I would go with that because of the particular project. But for regular quilting, I use Glide and So Fine. Now, the second thing I did after I quilted this, I quilted, first of all, this huge, practice piece. I think I probably did at least 10,000 pebbles. And then I loaded up a panel because I figured if I mess that up, it's just a $15 panel. It's not, a quilt that I spent a lot of time piecing. And it also gives you boundaries that you want to stay within. On the sheet, I could just kind of free motion and doodle and do this, that, and the other thing. With the panel, I wanted to create a certain effect, so it was the next level of practice before I actually loaded a quilt. Now, I think there is a question here. Let's see. Is there a way to change my foot on the Platinum 16 so I can use the Westerly rulers? As far as I know, the Westerly rulers are too thin. The Westerly rulers are made for domestic sewing machines. And when you use rulers on a long arm, you need to have a thicker ruler, 1/2 inch thick, because the hopping foot can hop above the thinner, wafer thin Westerly ruler, and then it can break your needle, throw off your timing. So you need a ruler that's specifically for a long arm quilter. Let me just see if there's any other questions that I haven't seen. I have, oh, here, Marcia says she has the 165Q with a 10-foot frame and am totally in love. Yes, yes, I have the 12-foot frame and I feel the same way. I've found my sweet spot. I like the fabric frame. It was definitely a step up from using I did do some quilting on my Diamond and on my Epic, and I did do a queen size quilt on those machines. Then I switched to the fabric frame with the Epic, and that was a step up. And then it was another step up to the 12-foot frame. And as I said, I don't have to base anymore, so I'm just very happy with that. Let's see if we have any more questions here. I think not. Let's see. I think that's it. Okay, so back to my presentation here. So the 165 and the 160 come with a variety of optional accessories. There is a ruler base. This, let's see if I can write on this. The ruler base, which if you're going to do ruler work, you're going to really want the ruler base because it extends out from the sides of the tray there, and it keeps your rulers level. Otherwise, they have a tendency to rock, and you won't get great results, and it could slide underneath the needle, and that would not be good. Then we have a number of optional feet that I'm going to show you how to use. And the rear handlebars, should you want to do pantographs, which I'm going to show you that a little later too. Now let's see if I can get this to change. There we go. So here's a better close-up of the ruler base. And as I said, it gives you extra support. I wouldn't personally want to be doing ruler work without it. And I leave mine on all the time because I'm constantly going from true free motion to ruler work to free motion to ruler work. And so I just leave it on all the time and it doesn't get in my way. And then you of course, are going to want a ruler foot that you can utilize with the rulers. We have an optional ruler foot that it is a little bit higher. Let's see if I can write on here. It's a little bit higher this way. So it works a little bit better. And then you have this cutout so you can see your needle. Then the optional feet that we have at this point in time is we have the square foot set, which is 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. And that is really good for doing things, you know, straight line quilting, matchstick stick quilting. Also for putting binding on your quilt when you're done quilting it. You can put the binding all the way around the quilt, and you're going to, of course, take it off to do to flip the binding over and sew it on the back. But at least you get that first part sewn right on your long arm. Then we have the Echo quilting feet set, and there's 3 sizes there: 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, and 3/4. Now those are also good for doing matchstick quilting, but they're also good for doing when you want to use a ruler that's curved. And what will end up happening is that you have a ruler that has a certain curve, a certain size, and by changing your foot, you can make larger curves. And you'll see that in a few minutes. I'm going to demo that. Then we have the glide foot that looks kind of like a little bowl. And I'm going to show you what you can do with that foot. That's a pretty nice foot to have as well. And then the rear handlebars. The rear handlebars attach onto the back of your long arm. This is for the stand-up long arm. And it also has the control on here, where you can set your stitch length and your speed and all that stuff, so you don't have to go around to the front to change your settings. So let's see if there's any other questions. I think not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to some demoing. Now, I have my long arm in my basement because it takes a lot of room. It's 12-foot long arm. Also, I live in a small town, and my internet is unpredictable. And so I could not do a live stream I couldn't do a live stream from my house and forget about doing it from the basement. So I have filmed some information about long arming, and I'm going to narrate it, and I'm going to stop. And if there's any questions, please ask. You don't have to wait till the end of the video to ask your questions. Just when it comes to you, just ask a question. Please feel free to do that. And I can stop the video and we can, discuss your question before we move on. And if there are any topics that I haven't covered about the long arm by the time we're done, please let us know, because we are making up new topics for future Facebook Lives and really would like your feedback. So I'm going to switch over to my video. So with the long arm, let's see if we can get that. There we go. So what I have here is I have the bobbin. And one of the trickiest things about long arming when you first start is getting the tension correct. And unlike a domestic sewing machine, the tension is set first in the bobbin. So you don't do anything with the top tension until you get your bobbin straightened out. And you see that it's a large metal bobbin. It's an M-size bobbin, and it fits into the bobbin case just like any other bobbin case that you're probably familiar with. However, when you pull the thread, it should turn clockwise. So I'm going to show that in a second, how it goes into the slot there, and you'll hear a little click. And then when you pull the thread, it should turn clockwise. Then when you're going to test the tension, you pull on the thread, and you should see the bobbin case stand up on your hand, but the thread comes out easily, and the bobbin case does not come up in the air and doesn't fall back on your hand. If you do need to adjust the tension, you're going to adjust it with the big screw, not the little one. And when you turn the screw, you're going to turn it in very small increments, kind of like the minutes on the face of a clock. It's a very subtle change. And then you're going to do that, what's called the drop test again, to see how it feels. So I do that every time that I change my bobbin. And you particularly want to do that test if you are changing threads, because you may have to adjust the tension if you go with a different brand thread, and because it has different, might be a slightly thinner, slightly thicker, so you may need to adjust your tension. And to make it tighter, you go to the right, righty-tighty. If you want to make it looser, you go to the left, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. Now, if you are the kind of person that really likes to be exacting, you can buy these bobbin tension gauges. And there's two different types. You want the M bobbin gauge for a long arm, and you can look up the ideal tension probably on your thread manufacturer's website. I know Superior, which I use, has the thread tensions that are ideal for its thread, and hopefully the other ones do as well. And in general, it's about 115, 120, but it does depend on the thread. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to thread the Q165. We have the 4-thread stand there, 4-spool thread stand. It goes through that first, then it goes through this pigtail. Then there is this metal piece that has 3 holes, and you always thread it from back to front. So you go back to front, then you loop around to the back again and go to the front. And you loop around after that and go to the back again and to the front. And you don't want to get it caught in the tension disc like I just did. Now, that is the way you will generally thread it. If you are using delicate thread as your top thread, like you're using a metallic, or you're using maybe a 100-weight thread, and if you get breakage, and it's not that you need a new needle or some other factor, I would try putting it only through 2 holes rather than all 3, because that's going to lessen the tension on that more delicate thread. Then it goes through this hook there, metal hook, and goes through the tension discs. And you have to make sure you get it deep between the 2 metal tension discs, and then it goes, when you pull on it, you'll see that metal piece move, that hook. And I always kind of floss it, make sure it's in there really well seated. Now this is a picture of what the back of your quilt will look like if you don't get it down into the tension discs. If it's just kind of laying in that on the tension disc and it's not deeply in there where it should be, you'll get this eyelashing on the back side, which is a bad surprise when that happens. So every time I change my thread, like if I change colors or if I run out of one thread, I'm changing to another, I always do a quick check of the back side because I don't want this kind of surprise where I have to pull out all these stitches and redo them. You can get to the point where you can just kind of feel underneath. You know, at first I would look underneath, or you can use a mirror to look underneath. So then it goes into the take-up lever and comes down this other pigtail holder. And then there is a hole in the needle bar that it goes through. And then it goes through the needle. Now, the needle in the front has a groove on it. If you look at it really closely, if you have your needle inserted properly, it has a groove going down the front. And if you are having trouble getting the thread into the hole of the needle because you can't see it, if you just slide down that groove, it'll go right in. So that's just a hint if you can't find your glasses and you need to rethread your machine. So now if you do need to change your tension, like if you, you've got your bobbin tension all set and you feel like you need to increase the top tension or decrease it, then when you turn the tension wheel, you're going to turn it a lot. The bobbin adjustments are very small, very minute, but the tension discs need to be, you almost do a full rotation and then retest it. So you turn it quite a bit and then you retest it. So if you're seeing the bobbin thread coming up, your top tension is too tight. And if you are seeing too much of the top thread on the bottom, then you need to tighten it. So again, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Now, this quilt that I have on here is a scrappy quilt that I'm going to be demoing on. So you'll see some different stitches on there. So now I'm pointing out that there are LED lights. The lighting is very, very nice. There's 16 inches of throat space and over 8 inches high there. And I'm going to demo just a little bit of freestyle, free motion so you can see how easily it moves. It just moves very smoothly. As long as you don't have any thread globs underneath the rollers, it is pretty smooth and easy to use. Now those little white rings that are next to my right hand are channel locks. So if you want to lock it so that you can do straight line quilting either horizontally or vertically, you place those locks on the wheels so that it assists you in going straight up and down or left and right. It's an optional thing. So rulers. First thing you do when you get a ruler, no matter what kind of quilting you're going to do, is I would put an adhesive disc, or probably 2 or 3, on the bottom of your ruler. You can get them at just about any store where you get notions, and it really helps to stabilize the ruler on your fabric. As soon as I get a ruler, I put the adhesive discs on there. This is one of my favorite rulers. It's a straight edge. I use this one probably more than any other because I kind of like straight edge quilting. But I also use this Versatool from Handy Quilter, which has a variety of shapes. You know, a tighter curve and then a more shallow curve. You can do V's, you can do straight lines. So that's another favorite. This one is particularly good for, whoops, let me go back and show you that. Okay. Should not have tried to go backwards. Let's see if I can get it back to where it was. Okay, so now I'm going to stop it where I want. There. This is the one I want to talk about. This ruler is really good for doing stitch in the ditch with applique, because applique is generally curved. Well, at least the applique that I do. They're curved shapes. And it has 2 holes for your fingers, and so it just assists you in doing that stitch in the ditch in a really nice way with this ruler. And then I have a whole lot of circles so that I can do different size arches as well as circles. So those are the rulers I use primarily. I have a few others I don't use as much. Now I'm going to hit my needle down and needle up so that I can pull up the bobbin thread. So you grab your top thread, and then your bobbin thread will be pulled up and you won't end up with a thread glob on the back. Now I'm going to do some stitch in the ditch with my straight edge, and you'll see that I'm going relatively slow because I want to stay in the ditch. When I go to just do straight line quilting, I can go quite a bit faster. But to keep it in the ditch, I take my time. And because it is a distance, I'm going to move my hand I'm going to stop the quilter. And I'm going to move my hand to make sure I've got the ruler stabilized. The right handle has a start-stop button on it, so I can hit that at any time when I'm using a ruler because I'm steering with my right hand. Now you'll see as I'm doing this, there's some red stitches. This quilt was made with long strips of fabric, and they were sewn together with my serger. And I used a flat lock stitch with a 12-weight red thread to give it that pop of color. And also it's incredibly fast to make a quilt. So I sewed together long strips of this fabric, cut them on a 45-degree angle, and then sewed those triangles together to make this block that I'm stitching on right now. And now you'll see the speed you can go at with the straight edge ruler. I'm just doing random distanced straight lines to mimic the lines in the quilt, and I'm not bothering to make them a certain distance apart because the strips are different sizes. You know, it's a scrappy quilt. And you see how easy it is to steer with one hand and hold the ruler with the other hand. And there's our straight lines. I found when I tried to do ruler work with a domestic machine that I felt like I needed an extra hand. Like it just wasn't working for me to move the quilt and hold the ruler at the same time. So these are different shapes that I use the ruler with and some free motion. Now, pantographs. This is using that rear handlebar. And the rear handlebar has the controls in the middle, which are exactly like the controls on the front of the machine. So you have full control from the back when you set up the rear handlebars. And then you are going to obtain a pantograph somewhere, which is basically something you're going to trace to make a pattern. This I just downloaded off of the internet for free. And I have a laser pointer attached to my machine. So I'm basically just tracing here. So it does take a bit of time to develop a smooth tracing technique. But this way you are following a design that you like, and you just follow along and you can get some really nice results. And there are hundreds of free pantographs online, as well as many, many companies that sell them. So if you want to try something like this out, just Google Pantograph and you'll find many, many designs. Now let's see if there's any questions here. We've got some comments, it looks like, but I don't know if there's any questions. Okay, so somebody says that Westerly does make thicker rulers made for long arms, but she just can't figure out how to get her regular foot off. I'm not familiar with the Platinum 16. I will try to look into that and figure out what the answer is to that problem. I'm going to show you how we would use how you remove feet on the 165 in just a minute, because I'm going to demo some other feet. But like I said, I'm not familiar with Platinum 16, but we'll look into that for you. And okay, and somebody else is saying she uses the long arm Westerly rulers. I have Westerly rulers, but they are from my domestic machine quilting days. So I was not familiar with the fact that they do also make long arm rulers. Makes sense. You just have to make the same ruler a little bit thicker. Okay. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the control box that's on the front handlebars or on the rear handlebars if you have the rear ones. And the M and the R are for manual and regulated. So I almost always stay in regulated unless I'm doing something like micro stippling, and then I'll probably go on manual. Then the next area down where it says 12, that's the number of stitches per inch. And I usually leave it on 11 or 12, again, unless I'm doing micro stippling, and then I might up that number. Or if I want to baste my batting down or my top at the top of the quilt, then I'll lower it as low as it goes, which is 4 stitches per inch to do some basting. I will also sometimes base the entire quilt to start out with as far as the sides and across in some areas. If I'm going to say start in the middle and work out, or if I'm going to be going back and forth to different areas in the quilt, then I will, do more basting. But if I'm going from the top down, I will baste across the top and the sides, quilt that, roll it up to the next unquilted area, and then baste down the sides, and then quilt, roll it up, baste down the sides, and quilt. And it's nice that you can just set your machine on 4 stitches per inch, and those stitches are really easy to remove later. Now, the next dials basically are, I'm blanking on the name, but basically what it is, it's continuous or it stops when you stop. So I keep it on continuous, where the way continuous works is that as I'm moving the quilter, it's stitching and it's matching my speed. And if I stop, it slows down really slow. And I like that even with rulers. Some people like to set it up where it will stop, and that's the dotted circle. With the dotted circle, it will be regulated while you're moving the head, and then as soon as you stop, it stops. I like it where it just keeps going slow, because if I'm just making a slight adjustment with my ruler, I can keep on going. And if I want it to stop, I drive with my right hand, so I just hit the stop button on the handlebar on the right and stop it, move my ruler, start it again. So I'm a continuous kind of gal. Then the number below is the speed. And I would recommend that you start really slow, like 50 or 75, until you get the hang of it. And then you can definitely increase it as your skill grows. Then you have a needle up and needle down button, which is basically where it's going to stop. You have a control on the left handlebar that will put your needle up and needle down as you're quilting. This on the control panel is where it's going to stop. Is it going to stop with the needle down or stop with the needle up? And then you have a settings. There's all sorts of things that statistics that will keep for you, and settings and other information in there that I'm not going to go into. And then the bottom right is to turn your light on and off. So again, this is the control that's on the front, and it would be on the rear if you have the rear handlebars installed. Let's see if I can speed this up a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the handlebar. So this is, this is the left handlebar control. So you have a needle up and needle down button, as well as speed. And then the right, you have speed, and you have start stop. The start stop, I really like having that on the right because I'm right-handed. And I use it a lot because I stay on continuous. And let's see, I think I have another question here. Are there plans to automate the quilting on this machine? Not at this time, unfortunately, but you can do pantographs if you don't like to do free motion. And that same question twice. Okay. So now I'm going to show you the glide foot, which, like I said, looks like a little bowl. And this foot is really good for quilting over bumpy seams. You know, like if you have a block where you have a lot of pieces coming together in a central area, so there's many seams meeting, you often have a bump. Well, your regular quilting foot will not ride over that smoothly every time, depending upon how high that bump is. The glide foot will. It will glide right over it. And it is also good for when you're quilting on things like minky, or if you like to add rickrack or piping to your quilts, so that it will roll over those things and you can just keep going. Now, you can also yarn couch with it, and I'm going to show you how you would go about doing that. So I've done a few waves of this with this yarn that's kind of interesting looking. And I have these tweezers that have a very sharp point on them, so they fit pretty well into the hole in the glide foot. And I start by pushing the yarn into the hole, then I lift the foot up and pull it out from below. And then what I'm going to do to stitch it down is I'm basically just going to do a freehand, very small zigzag. And you could certainly use metallic thread and make it, you know, kind of shiny. You can use much thicker yarn, like the really bulky stuff. You know, whatever you want a couch. You could use satin cording, because the hole is, you know, a significant size. It's not really tiny in the glide foot. And now I'm going back over it since this yarn is kind of thin in between the little balls of fluff. So this would be particularly interesting to, you know, art quilters, wherever you want texture, you know, special effect on your quilts. Now the square feet set, like I said, they come in 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch. And they are good for using rulers and doing matchstick quilting, but you can also use them to do your binding. So if I wanted to get an incredibly straight line of stitches there, I would probably also use my ruler, but the quilting foot, I put the 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm just going to glide the foot on the edge of the fabric, so that if the edge of the foot is on the edge of the fabric, I'm going to have a 1/4 inch stitch. And if it's not very pristine straight edge, you're not going to notice that, because that piece of fabric is going to be flipped over. You're not even going to see those stitches. So you prepare your binding just like you would when you're doing binding as usual. You know, I had 2 inches or 2 1/4 inches that I folded over and pressed, and I've got the raw edge on the raw edge of the quilt that I have previously quilted. And I've got light colored thread so you can see the stitch, and I'm just going to stitch along. And then when I get to the corner, I'm going to go off through the corner, off to the batting. And then I have to make my miter. So I'm going to stop this right here because I want to point something out. You see I have this yardstick here. Odd thing to see on your long arm, right? Well, when you use the ruler base, which you see the ruler base to the right of the back bar, you see that shiny clear plastic, that's the ruler base. I leave mine on all the time. And when you get to the very edge, that ruler base can bang against the clips. The clips help to keep the quilt taut, quilt sandwich. So you want to have those on there. If you stick a yardstick underneath the cord, it holds the end of the edge of the quilt up enough so that the clamps do not bang into the ruler base. So I just have my yardstick handy all the time, and when I get towards the end, I stick it in underneath the elastic cording so that the clamps don't hit my ruler base and throw off my stitches. So now I'm going to do a miter just like I would on a domestic machine, and turn it to a right angle, then fold it over and line up the raw edge with the raw edge of the quilt. And then start stitching. You see the square foot, the edge of the square foot is on the edge of the fabric, and you just stitch along there. And then you see the miter. Then, of course, you'd need to, take your quilt off, cut off the extra batting, and then flip the binding over and sew it to the back. Let's see, I think we have some more comments possibly. Okay, so Denise says she's tried everything, including what has been suggested. The Platinum 16 doesn't raise high enough, even when pushing up with my fingers, and even if I take the plate off, just not enough room to get the foot off. I don't think I'm able to take the foot off. Well, like I said, I'm going to look into that and see if there is a fix for that. I don't know the answer to that. So the Echo feet. As I said before, you can use these with rulers and do straight line quilting, and I'm going to demo that. So I have previously here done some stitching with these feet. That's the 3/8, half, and then I'm going to pull out the 3/4 inch foot here. And you'll see how to remove the foot on the 165. So there's a toolkit that comes with the 165, and one of the tools is this. Actually, what I'm showing here is those are on the left-hand side. Those are stitches that are 1/4 inch apart using the ruler foot, the metal ruler foot, and my straight edge. Then this next row of stitches is the 3/8 inch Echo foot. And then the next, where it gets a little bit bigger, is the 3/2 inch Echo quilting foot. So you see that the distance between the straight lines gets gradually greater. And here's the little hex wrench, or hex, whatever it's called. There's a screw there that you loosen, and then you lift up on the bar, and you can pull out the foot and swap it out with another foot. So you pull up, and then that other foot will pop on, and then you need to use your wrench to tighten up the screw. Now I'm going to take my straight edge and show you how I line things up with this foot. You bring your straight edge to your last row of stitches. So you want to line it up with those stitches. Then you're going to just ride that foot along the edge there, and with this 3/4 inch foot, you're going to get 3/4 inch distance. Then I'm going to line it up with this line and come back and get that thread out of the way. I didn't bother to bring my bobbin thread up because this is just a demo, but typically I would start by putting my needle down and then up and pulling the bobbin thread up if it were an actual quilt. Then I'm just going to bring it over to that line of stitches and go back down. And again. And now you see the difference. Like I said, the 1/4 inch is using the metal ruler foot, and then the 3/8 through 3/4 are the Echo quilting feet from the Echo quilting feet set. Then if you use it with one of your curved rulers, this is where you wouldn't, with the curved ruler, you couldn't use the square foot. You could use the square foot for the straight lines, but you need a round foot like this to do curves. So you have a ruler that would create a certain size curve. If you have the ruler feet, you have bigger and bigger curves that you can make based on the size of the Echo foot. So without adding more rulers, you have more designs that you can make using the feet. Okay. So we have just a few minutes. Let's see if there's some more questions here. Isn't there a conversion kit you can change your feet? And I think this is Suzanne. I think you're referring to on the Platinum 16. And again, I'm going to look into that situation. I really don't know the answer to that. Any other questions? I think that I have gotten them. So we are coming to the end of our time together, and if you have any questions, now's the time to start typing, and I will be happy to answer your questions. Like I said in the beginning, I love my 12-foot Platinum Q165. I love that I don't have to baste anymore. It has made me a very, very happy quilter, having that machine. Now, that your mileage may vary. You may be the kind of person that would prefer to sit down and move the fabric and have the Q160, which I know a lot of people love. All the feet fit the Q160. I just have an easier time doing ruler work where I'm moving the needle rather than moving the fabric. That's just my preference, and I don't have any problem standing. So does HV have a 5-foot mid-arm? Well, you know, it depends on what you mean by mid-arm. A lot of people think of the 16-inch as a mid-arm, you know, as opposed, because some long arms are like 22-inch throat, 24-inch, 26-inch. So mid-arm is sort of kind of a vague term, but let me go back to my PowerPoint. You could think of this setup as a mid-arm. When you have, on the right-hand side, you've got a 5-foot fabric frame and the Q165 setup on that. Now, if you're asking, do they make a frame where you don't have to baste? No, we don't have that kind of frame. If you want to not have to baste, you need to go with the 10-foot or the 12-foot frame. And okay, Denise says, I have a sit down and a stand up, totally different concepts. Yeah, they are. I mean, I think it's a different skill set. And I think most people gravitate towards one or the other. You know, like I said, with cars, you know, give me a big pickup and I'm happy. Tiny cars just don't do it for me. So you may be a tiny car person and you want, you know, the Q165 where you're sitting, and that floats your boat. I like the big long arm where I'm standing and I'm moving my needle, not the fabric. Let's see if there's any other questions. Darlene says it's been helpful, and that's wonderful. I love praise. Let's see if we have any other. I think that's it. I did want to remind you that the Viking educators are doing virtual classes to dealers. So if you would like us to perhaps do a class for your dealer, you should tell them that, you know, you would love to see one of the Viking educators do a virtual class. We're doing them directly to the customers' homes, or we are also doing virtual classes to the store if you are able to go to the store safely. So we're doing project-based classes, and we are also doing classes where the virtual classes to the customer store are more technique classes where we do a trunk show and show you how to do different techniques. Like there's a class that we do on quilting it's quilting techniques as far as using your embroidery machine or using different hoops, using embellishment feet, not doing long arming, doing domestic quilting. We have a class on sergers. We have a class, we're on serging technique, class on embellishment, which goes over embellishing garments, home deck, quilts, using sewing and embroidery techniques. We have a class on zippers, a class on our software, the MySonet, the new version. I think I'm covering most, if not all of them. So we would love to come to your store and do classes for you, you know, personally for your the store that you go to. So just mention it to your dealer that you saw us on Facebook Live and you would like one of the educators to do a virtual class for their store. So thank you so much. And this video will be posted, and you know, there will be a recording of it so you can view it again. And you know, just keep checking our homepage, because we have more classes coming up, and just about every 2 weeks. So I thank you for your time. And again, happy St. Patrick's Day and happy quilting. So I hope you all get a chance to quilt today, or at least sew. Thanks for joining me.